Right. Oh, good evening, everybody. Hope you're all well. This is Professor Tennyson Mokuchini. Welcome to um, one of the sessions that we have for the online Masters and Doctoral Support Program. It's been a couple of weeks, if not a little bit more, since we had a live session such as this. So we're really happy to see that you have not lost interest or focus in the program. Many people have been inquiring about when the live sessions will return, so they are back. And we thought it would be good to start today with something a little bit more friendly. Here we go. I didn't think anyone thought we'd do this.
It's me. I was wondering if after all these years you'd like to
me. Yes, I thought we would just have a light-hearted moment very quickly. So back to the matter at hand. This week we have a couple of sessions. We have two particular sessions, all looking at the role of theory, theoretical and conceptual frameworks, and how these things are applied in scholarly research. The reason that we have two sessions really is that it's a very, very extensive area that comes up in many places during your study, and often people need to be orientated to what it is that theoretical and conceptual frameworks represent within one's work. It is important that we kind of deliberate on this properly, because it really is the center of what forms your study in many ways. So the two sessions that we'll have are quite different from each other. They are very different from each other, but they cover one big zone of the discourse that you have to be introduced to. So as always, you know that with these sessions, I begin with the camera on, and then once that is done, I will turn off the camera and just go into an audio presentation of today's content. We will once again be sharing the link to this video on our MOOC site. We've also been working on putting some of this material out on YouTube, but we're still at the early stages of finalizing that. Of course, as with research, it is important that we make sure that we keep to the principles of research, we keep to the principles of investigative rigor, we keep to the principles of systematic approaches, and so forth and so forth. So you will see that this work that I share with you really kind of builds on those concepts. At the end of this session or during the session, you all have access to the live Q&A, and I will take moments to work through the questions that are presented, and hopefully that should attend to many of your needs. Right, without taking up much more time, I will get into the actual presentation that we have today, and we'll share this content, which is actually what the session will be about this afternoon or this early evening. Now, as I've said, the session that you have, the couple of sessions that you've got are focusing exclusively on the role of theory in research. We're also looking at theoretical and conceptual frameworks. And that is essentially what covers all the theory-related expectations within your study. Of course, the depth of exploration, as always, varies depending on what level of study you're in and the anticipated engagement of theory that your work has got to deal with. Now, okay, I will just make sure that we get into this. Right. Okay, as always, we begin the session by specifying what it is that we will be doing and the kind of expectations that one should have at the end of this session. So, as I've said, this is a two-part presentation. Now, the first part looks at the role and utilization of theory. And of course, here I've used the PhD as the example, but those of you doing master's work, those of you doing a mini master's also have to be aware of how you utilize theory in your work. And it is similar to the PhD utilization. It just may not have the same depth. And of course, then we will also speak about the role that theoretical gaps have. So at the end of this session, you will understand the basic, you'll have a good understanding of what theory is. You will also have an understanding of where theory is likely to appear in your study in relation to your dissertation or your thesis. You will also be able to understand the three specific ways in which theory is utilized. There are three very specific, three particular ways in which you utilize theory in your work, whether be it a master's or a doctorate. And then, of course, we will very quickly speak about the role that theoretical gaps have. And to get to that, we begin as always with the quick overview, which I have already given some insights into. Firstly, we need to look at some definitional issues related to theory. I just need to explain some things that relate to what theory is, how it exists. Then we shall look at theory application within a doctoral thesis or within a master's dissertation. And there's this thing that I call a three-factor exploration. And that really explores or talks to the way that theory can be utilized in three very specific ways. So that three-factor exploration refers once again to the three specific ways. Then, of course, along with that, we will just be touching on how these three different ways of utilizing theory can be used to develop your thesis or your master's dissertation, as it were. So the first bit, and this is always my entry point to any engagement about any topic, the initial thing to look at is really to understand when we talk about theory, what it is that we mean. And Pollitt and Beck, and many of you will notice that these are often quoted sources that I refer you to, and in part because Pollitt and Beck have done a lot of foundational clarification work on research concepts. And one of the things I look at is they explain what a theory is. And they argue that a theory is an abstract generalization that offers a systematic explanation about how phenomena are interrelated. Embedded in this is the view that a theory has two related but distinct purposes. One, a theory will help you to explain things, and of course, a theory helps you to predict things. So what they are basically saying in simple terms is that a theory, when they say abstract, they mean that it is not based in the everyday practices. It's not based in reality. It's not a practice-based thing. It's an idea more than anything. Then generalization. So a theory is an idea that offers a global perspective about something in a way that it generalizes things. Then, of course, it offers you a systematic explanation. So the explanations that you find from theory will be would have emerged from a system of thinking. And then, of course, in it, the theory will explain to you how particular things that are related to that phenomena relate to each other. And then, of course, the theory helps you to explain what is going on. So if you're understanding the topic that you're researching, theories help you to understand what is going on within those topics. And then, of course, additionally, theories will help you to predict what you would expect to see in relation to the phenomena that you are studying. So someone will say, look, they're looking at theories to do with maybe a theory on management. That theory will allow you to explain what goes on when people manage things. And then, of course, it can give you predictions about what you should expect to see when individuals are in management-driven systems. So I've given a couple of examples of how some theories may explain to you how specific behaviors are related to health outcomes. So some theories will say if people are exposed to a lot of stress, they are likely to become unwell. So it explains to you certain things, but it also offers you a prediction about what you see. But remember, the key thing about theory is that theory is an opportunity to explain phenomena. They also offer an opportunity to provide predictions in relation to that phenomena. So two things that theories do. Of course, others have defined it too, and Walker and Avant offer an alternative but similar articulation of what a theory is. And they believe that a theory is an internally consistent group of relational statements that present a systematic view about a phenomena, and that is useful for description, explanation, prediction, and prescription or control. So what they do is that they are consistent with the view offered earlier from Pollitt and Beck, but they add additional dimensions of what the purpose of a theory is. And the fact that some theories offer a descriptive overview, some theories offer an explanation of what is going on, some theories give you insights into predicting what could be, and of course, some theories, by virtue of them claiming to know what is going on, they can prescribe to you how you work or act within a particular area that's related to a phenomenon of interest. So that's the other definition. Of course, similarly, within the definition of what a theory is, Walker and Avant also take that a little further and give us some steps about what is involved when people develop a theory. And the reason I'm specifically citing this is that it relates quite a bit to those of you who will have a study where you are hoping to end your study by developing some model, by developing a framework, by developing a theory. All those things are subjected, according to Walker and Avant, to 4 specific steps when you generate them. That the first thing when you are developing a theory is that you develop the concepts that you think are important to the phenomena. So take, for example, if you are interested in the issue of student success within a university environment, you would, in developing your concepts, you would be looking at those elements that you believe are necessary and add or influence student success. And so one of the concepts you'd be interested in might be people's inborn intelligence, the IQ. Sometimes it might be to do with the person's hardworking stroke motivational attributes. Another concept might be to do with whether they are the socio-economic status and so forth. So all of those are concepts that are related to this phenomena of student success. So when you develop those concepts, then it gives you a sense of what it is that matters and what it is that doesn't matter. And drawing from those concepts, a person can then say, look, I am now in a position to develop a summative statement that says that this phenomena that I'm interested in relates or is affected by the X, Y, Z, and so forth concepts. That particular issue around the development of a statement is really to do with somebody having many concepts that they think are relevant and kind of putting them together in a statement that they think represents a position or a collective or a conglomerated view about the phenomena they're interested in. And then that statement becomes the basis of the theory that they develop. And of course, once you have developed a theory, we know that it is an abstract formulation. And if you want it to really have good gravitas, then what you do is you test it. So those are the steps that exist in theory development. I share those because they will become important for you, to you, in a number of scenarios. Now, I spoke about the fact that when we look at theory within scholarly research, there are three ways in which theory presents itself within your study, within your research, and in every way that we mention theory. So if we talk about theory, we talk about conceptual frameworks, we talk about theoretical frameworks. All those things are types of theory contributions, and they appear within your work in three very, very specific ways. The first way is that when you think about theory, you should think about it as being that which underpins the research design. So when someone decides whether their study is going to be qualitative, quantitative, and so forth, that decision about the paradigm that they are going to be using is driven by theory. That theory being the theory which would have informed you to kind of ascertain whether the area you're interested in is better understood in a subjective way, in an objective way, in a constructivist way, that sort of thing. So the first way in which we relate to theory is by seeing theory as that which underpins research design. So that is a way of seeing your theory as being a paradigm, a way of thinking, and so forth. The second way in which we engage or meet theoretical concepts within scholarly work is by thinking about theory as that which may inform our understanding of the phenomena under investigation. So, in other words, in this context, you're using theory as a lens. If you think of classes that you look through, that you have spectacles that you look through. If those spectacles have a blue hue, they are brown, they are red, they shape how you see what you see. And so theory also puts lens on us, and those lenses inform our understanding of the phenomena that we're looking at. So take, for example, that you may decide that you're going to study student success, but you are someone who actually believes that the world of success or people's ability to be successful is based on their level of motivation. So you have decided that you're going to see success through the lens of motivational science. That those who succeed must therefore be hard workers, those who fail must therefore be not such hard workers. So you have used the theory of motivation as the lens by which you will look at everything to do with success. Then finally, the last way that you think of theory is by looking at it as that which may emerge from our study. So when we carry out a study, the discoveries that you make in relation to your study all come out in the form of results. Those results can be loose standing results, or if you're someone who has a theoretical compass that guides you, you would then find that you are using theory as a way of making sense of what it is that you found. So some people may not, for example, understand the factors that are behind student success, but when they collect the results, they suddenly realize that, hey, all these factors look like things that are related to motivational sciences. So then, at that point, they use the theory, or in that point, theory has been used to make sense of new knowledge. And those are the three places. So you think of theory as a paradigm, theory as a lens, and theory as new knowledge. So essentially, in your assignment or in your master's dissertation or in your doctoral thesis, you'll find that there will be three distinct spaces where there's quite substantial theoretical contribution. Firstly, when you talk about theory as being a paradigm, you will utilize very theoretical positions, information from theoretical spaces to underpin the research design that you choose. Secondly, you will refer to theory to inform your understanding of the phenomena that you're looking at. So if you believe that student success is a phenomena and that it is affected by motivation, you may have a lens that's to do with motivation. If you think success is affected by socio-economic status, you would have a lens that looks at this from a socio-economic space. Then finally, of course, the last part where theory will emerge in your dissertation or your thesis is where you have all these findings and you're trying to bring them together to make sense of them. And to do that, you then start to notice theoretical coincidences that you say, oh, I see that my findings appear to be in this way, but the way that they are formulated and the way they are developed is consistent with a particular theory. So these are the three ways that you are asked to think about theory. I will leave them up for 20 seconds so you can consider them, because everything that we do going forward actually jettisons or it jumps off from this acknowledgement of the three ways of thinking about theory. Right. Okay. Now I have identified the fact that theory can be thought of in three ways. So I want to speak about those three ways in greater depth. So firstly, when we talk about theory as a paradigm, we are actually talking about, firstly, a number of ways in which paradigms are formulated and arise. So from the broadest consideration to the most proximal, and to the, when I say proximal, to the smallest unit that you consider when you think of paradigms. If you think of paradigms as ways of thinking, so firstly, theory will guide our philosophical assumptions about what constitutes social reality, and we call that the ontology. So people will come across theory as a way of explaining, or they will find that theory offers opportunities for explaining some of the assumptions we have about what it is that we consider to be real, what it is that we consider to be not so real. So this whole thing about, is the truth to do with objective things, or is the truth to do with subjective experiences and so forth? So that's the first level of paradigm that we look at, the ontology. Then, of course, people will say the next level at which we consider theory in terms of it as a paradigm is how we accept or think about what reality is, you know, how we think about our reality. So, and and this is what is often referred to as epistemology. And there are different epistemologies. People will talk about the fact that, you know, some will say the reality that we have is a product of how we construct the world around us. So basically, they'll be saying, look, the reality that you live in is constructed by your social world. That I can literally give everybody 10 rands, and there will be some who will be very disappointed that 10 rands is nothing. Some will think it's okay. Some will think that it's an amazing amount to give them. So in actual fact, the reality is created by the social space in which they live. So that is a type of epistemology, that we are saying that people's reality can be socially constructed. Rich people would think 10 Rand is nothing, poor people would think 10 Rand is everything. But in actual fact, 10 Rand is 10 Rand, no matter who you are and where you are. So that's a type of epistemology called social constructivism. There's also a different epistemology people will talk about, where they will say, look, people come from a positivist space where they see things as only having one true identity, that a fact cannot be contested, and that a fact is a fact. So someone would say, look, 10 rands is 10 rands, no matter who you are. And that is a type of seeing the world. It's a type of reality creation, that people will create an objective reality and so forth. Then, of course, others refer to another way that people create reality, that they create reality by virtue of the interpretations that they make. And that we can all know that 10 Rand is 10 Rands, but for some, if I give them 10 Rands, they will feel their interpretation is that you're giving me 10 Rands because you think I'm poor. So instead of them being happy with you, they become upset. but other people would see 10 Rand and say, you give me 10 Rands because you value me. So that whole issue is to do with all those examples that I gave you are part of our ways in theoretical ways in which people create or substantiate or give evidence for the reality that they're in. That some will give it through constructivist ways, some will give it through positivist ways, some will give it through interpretationist ways. Then, of course, theory as a paradigm can also happen in terms of methodology. So people will decide that, look, I believe, I look at the world that I'm in, and I believe that my world is, or the phenomena I'm looking at, is best understood by gaining deep insights into what people think. Then you find that the methodologies you choose are qualitative. If you thought that your phenomena was best understood by objectively counting things related to it, it would be a quantitative investigation that you would pursue. But some might say, hey, the reality of what I'm investigating and is that it involves counting, it also involves deep insights, and therefore it's mixed methods. And then, of course, the means by which we gather evidence relates to the methods. And those two are a type of, they are all driven by theory. Remember, we were saying that theory will exist in three ways. The first is that theory can exist as a paradigm. And in that paradigm, there are elements such as ontology, epistemology, the methodologies, and the methods that are ingrained in this. So in basic sense, if you are the part of your study where you are saying, look, I want to give you insights into how theory informed my choice of paradigm, then we are expecting that when you write up about that, you will say, hey, my ontological position in relation to my study is X, and my epistemological position in relation to my study is this, and the methodologies that I chose are this, and the methods that I utilized are that. So that whole section where you declare your ontology, your epistemology, your methodology, and your methods, they are a section that is really driven by theory. But this is the first way in which theory is introduced in your work. You introduce it to drive your philosophical and assumptions about what social reality is. You use it to give evidence for how you perceive reality. Then you use it to guide the way in which you will collect data and so forth. And then you use it to guide the methods that you will use to collect data. Once again, this is a very important slide, which really kind of gives you a structure which I hope you'll pursue, so that when you're writing your methodology section and you are explaining to us how theory has guided you to the set of things that you'll be interested in, you can give a brief overview of the ontological origins of your study, the epistemological origins, the methodology, and the methods. Now, you will know that, of course, what I have done is I have spoken through ontology, I've spoken through epistemology, I've spoken through methodology, and I've spoken through the methods. But each of these things I have provided some insights into how you can consider or think about them, and all these are represented in the next 4 upcoming slides. And so this slide here really orientates you to the ontological perspective that I spoke about, and I will let it sit for a while so you can see what ontology is really based around. Now, if you remember, the second paradigm component, I said there are 4 components that speak to our use of theory as a paradigm. The second paradigm component related to epistemology. And epistemology, sorry, I've said this word 1,000 times, but I still, once in a while, it gets me. So when we speak about epistemology, we're referring to what we believe as constituting reliable and valid knowledge. So, and there are 3 main constructs that people talk about when they talk about epistemological thinking, and these constructs are sometimes described in different ways, but they are actually they come from this OSC construction of them. That the first construct within epistemological consideration is this construct around objectivism. And an objectivist believes that meaningful reality exists out there, and that us as human beings just have to discover it. So an objectivist asserts that the meaning or the value that you attach to something is already embedded in that something that you're looking at, and our job is just to be able to assess what's in front of us, and that the properties of that thing that you're looking at can be measured and quantified numerically, and that if everyone does their job right, everything we see should have the same measurements and should be quantifiable in the same way. So what objectivism is basically saying is that, look, there's an objective reality out there, and if you ask someone to go and find out what their experience of this session that I teach, they should all tell you about the same truth, because there was just one experience of being taught, and an objectivist would believe that the answer to that thing would be one answer. Any other answer that's outside of that is not to do with the experience being different. It is to do with the fact that the assessors were in some way not the same. So objectivism really is about saying that things can be objectively quantified and measured, and if done so properly, they are all the same. So that's what quantitative researchers generally believe. That is what quantitative researchers are generally driven by. Then the second construct is this construct of subjectivism, which this epistemology puts forward the view that meaning emerges not from the interplay between the subjects and the object, but it is imposed on the object by the subject. So what this is saying in basic terms is that in this particular construction of reality, the view is that what we see is not a constant thing. It is shaped by who we are. So the objects that we see, the reality of what that object is really an interplay between what it really is and what we are. And we'll take an example. So if you get 10 people who observe a car accident, and afterwards you ask them all to describe what they saw. Some will say this accident was horrific, you couldn't look at it. Some will say it was just an unfortunate incident, and they will portray it as just an unexpected turn of events. The fact is, the accident is the same accident, but it has only been deconstructed differently because of who the subject who experienced it was. So subjectivism says that the meaning that we attribute to things comes from us somehow looking at an objective thing and inputting our subjective tendencies on that thing. But objectivism, which I gave earlier, argues that, look, if we were all asked to sit in front of a place and observe an accident, the meaning associated with that accident is possessed by the accident itself. That if you want the descriptions of what is going on, you just need to examine objectively in a quantifiable way what was going on. And that's all that reality is made of. Subjectivism, as I've explained, is more to do with the fact that the argument is that the subjects and the objects have a relational involvement with each other, and depending on what the subject's pre-existing views are, then it is likely that they will subjectively place a meaning on what they've seen, which would be different from others. So objectivism believes there's one real truth. Subjectivism believes there's more than one real truth, and that one real truth is driven by the subject and not by the object. And then constructionism is another construct within epistemology, and in this, the argument is that reality is socially constructed by people as they engage in the world that they interpret. So in essence, what constructionism is that it argues that everything we see is shaped by the social experiences that have made us. So similarly, if we take the example of an accident, the argument of a constructionist would be that if you looked at an accident, those who think it's appalling do so because they come from a social world that has made them think accidents are appalling. Those who think that, oh, there's nothing particularly difficult about it, it's a mathematical chance that every one of us will at one point have an accident. And that position may be created by the types of exposure individuals have had. So this is how when we talk about epistemology, there are the three main constructs that you consider. And so you have to make a decision in your study about which of these constructs sits in your world. Now, I have also then come down to breaking down the things that are some of the questions that people ask in relation to this first part of theory as a paradigm. So you would then be talking about things about what it is in your study that you believe would represent valid, reliable knowledge. Then, of course, we ask you to give some insights into how you would make or draw out the reality of what is being seen, your interpretations of the meaning that you give, then the methods that you use to produce and to produce reliable and valid knowledge, all of that. And then, of course, when we talk about the methodologies, we are really talking about the strategies and the methods that you would use in support of the ontological and epistemological position that you hold. So if you come from a basis that says, hey, you believe that the reality of what you are is a subjectively determined thing, so what methods do you use that align with subjectivity? And that then becomes the argument between qualitative versus quantitative research and so forth. Then, of course, that extends on to you asking much more localized questions about what the best methods of collecting your data are and which tools and methods are most appropriate. But all of these things, if you realize, are driven by that whole appreciation of theory as a paradigm, that once you lock yourself into an ontological position, you lock yourself into an epistemology, you lock yourself into a methodology, then of course you lock yourself into the range of methods that are available. Now, what I have done is, of course, done a little bit of how you would apply theory, once you have committed yourself to a particular ontology, to a particular epistemology, and a particular methodology. So if you were doing a qualitative study, you would realize that, okay, a qualitative study comes from it either is a constructionist epistemology, or it's subjectivity. It's definitely not an objectivism based application. So once you have done that, then the choices you now have to make is, are you interested in this from a constructionist point of view, or from a subjectivism point of view? And in this case, the example is the interpretative design paradigm, which is subjectivism, but it's a very specific type of subjectivism. And then, of course, the key principles are subjectivity and the principle of how your subjective view of things will guide the way that you make interpretations. Then, of course, if you are in a study that is subjective or interpretative or qualitative in nature, it is understood that at the very beginning there's an assumed position where a qualitative researcher believes they do not have a strong theoretical sense of what's happening. They are going to develop it as they study the area more. So you'll see that when you develop theory, people develop it during their study example or sometimes after, and that's the posteriori option, where we say post the event. Basically, we are saying that the development of this theory doesn't happen at the beginning end of one study. It happens somewhere during, as you collect data, and somewhere at the end. But you'll find that if you were doing a quantitative study, there are already pre-existing assumptions that people hold, which tell them which variables matter or not. So the theory development can even happen before the study, during the study, and also after. And the process by which you engage in once you're in a qualitative study is inductive in relation to the fact that you study things without a theoretical position driving you, but once you have your findings, you're able to say, what do my findings look like? And then from that, you can induce a close-fitting theoretical construct that you think might help you to explain and understand what you have seen. So this is just an example of how one would have applied their theory within a study. Similarly, here's an example of a theory application within a quantitative study. And once again, in a quantitative study, it's an inquiry based on testing a theory composed of numerical variables measured and analyzed via statistical procedures in order to determine whether the predictive generalizations of the theory hold true. So in essence, we're saying that a quantitative study is a study that is interested in cause and effect relationships, and it comes with the positivist or post-positivist paradigm. And the key principle here is not subjectivity or constructivism, it is more objectivity, the whole idea that the reality we live in can be measured and so forth and so forth. And of course, in quantitative work, because there's an assumed pre-understanding of the topic, then one would do theory B. There's potential for you to develop theory before, which they sometimes call a priori, and then 2, you can also do it during and after the study, and this has a more deductive process of exploration. So rather than people understanding something and then making sense of it, with this, you already have a pre-existing understanding of it, and the findings that you have allow you to deduce new things, hence the deductive process explanation. Now, mixed methods studies represent an interesting mix in that they utilize both qualitative and quantitative strategies. So in many ways, what a theory application in a mixed method study is that it is essentially the combination of both the quantitative and the qualitative exploration examples that I gave you. But the added thing is that you would vary things based on the nature of the study. Is it a concurrent mixed study, mixed method study? Is it a sequential mixed method study? Is it concurrent? Is it mixed method in or sequential in relation to the qualitative coming before the quantitative, and so on? Now, the second place where you are likely to meet theory in your study is where you meet theory as a lens. So remember, we said initially theory was used as a way of informing the paradigm choice that you believe your phenomena exists within. So is it an objectivism type of existence? Is it a subjectivism? Then beyond that, people will say, look, I now am studying a phenomena, and this phenomena has come up or is best understood by me making references to some theories that inform my understanding. So in the use of theory as a lens, the basic thing that happens is that people look at existing theories that are related to their phenomena of interest, and they use these to explain how the issue or phenomena they are looking at is likely to work. So if, say, for example, I was to look at student success, once again, is the area that I'm interested in studying, it may be that people would say, look, the way that success is defined within the learning environment is governed by learning theory. So then the lens that you will look at is the learning theory lens, which, and some of the theories that are in that learning theory world involve models of learning such as Skinner's behaviorist model, Piaget's constructivist model, or the deep learning models by Anderson. And what we're basically saying here is that, look, in your use of theory as a way of seeing things, you may decide that, look, if I'm going to see success, I will see success as something to do with the way that people learn. So I will refer to some theories that will help me to define what this process of learning involves. Is it to do with adoption of behaviors? Is it to do with the way that we construct our reality, and so forth? Or someone else will say, look, the other types of lens that are available for me to look at my work have to do with the theories that talk about expertise development, theories that talk about how someone moves from being a novice to an expert, such as Benner's work. So what I'm basically saying here is that when you look at a field of study, or you look at a phenomena, that phenomena will have concepts in it. So you might be looking at student success and you'll think success has some concepts embedded in it. And those concepts, I know about them because they're theories that help me to believe that they relate to my phenomena of interest. So in success, maybe the lens that you'll use is motivational theory, or you'll look at models of learning, or you'll look at models of professional or expertise development. So some of you might actually be studying things to do with the strength of bridges. Say you are an engineer and you're wanting to understand how bridges, or the bridges that people drive over, how we can talk about their resilience. And some will say, oh, maybe the first area of understanding bridges is that we believe bridges are strengthened by the type of materials that are used. So one of the lens of looking at bridge strength is to do with material studies, studies of the materials. Or some will say, no, it might be a result of climatic conditions. So the other lens that you look at is that you look at the strength of bridges based on the climatic conditions that are in existence. Both those examples are theoretical lenses that help you to expand on and to explain the reality of what you're interested in. So that's the second part in which we use theory as a lens. Then finally, where we talk about theory as a lens, the last bit is where things like theoretical frameworks and conceptual frameworks, in fact, theoretical frameworks belong to the world of this theory as a lens, because a theoretical framework is essentially a set of related theories that you believe help you to understand and to shape your explanation of what it is that you are studying. So if you're going to study student success, you'll say, look, these are the 4 theories that help me to really specify what theoretical success is, and or what these are the theories that help me to define what student success looks like. And so on that basis, those theories, be it 3 or 4 of them, they represent the theoretical framework. They offer you the theories that shape and color the lens that you use to look at something. So the whole concept around theoretical frameworks is actually an example of how we use theories as a lens. Then, of course, the final way in which you are expected to think about theory is when you think about theory as new knowledge. So when you when you have studied an area, you come into an area with theory that you use as paradigm, and that theory helps you to describe the ontology and so forth and so forth. Then when it's time to study the phenomena that you're looking at, you look at that theory, at that phenomena using theory as a lens. So you say, hey, for me to understand this behavior or phenomena that I'm interested in, I draw from these 4 or 5 theoretical positions, and those theoretical positions become the lens by which you explore the phenomena that you are looking at. But then you study that phenomena and you carry on and you collect more data and you discover that, hey, those theories that you were leaning on have additional concepts that they were not aware of, and you have found those concepts and you join those concepts and modify these concepts so that they're integrated into the original theory. This new modification, this new looking theory, that's a combination of pre-existing theoretical positions and your own theoretical insights, becomes what we call a conceptual framework. So essentially, I've said to you, you meet theory in three places. You meet it in the development of your study. You meet it in the development of your theories that inform your understanding of your phenomena. Then you also meet it in the way that you shape the data outputs that you get. So that's where the whole world of conceptual and theoretical frameworks come up from. Then, of course, this next slide talks a little bit more about theoretical or conceptual frameworks. And this I will cover when we do the next session much more thoroughly. But all that I'm trying to explain to you is that at the very end part of our understanding of theory, when we utilize theory as new knowledge, that new knowledge can come up in the form of what we call a conceptual framework. And in quantitative research, a conceptual framework may typically be something that you develop after a literature review. So you've got all the foundational theories, you've got a sense of these things. And of course, the conceptual framework lists all the concepts that we believe are important in gaining a full understanding of the phenomena that you're looking at. In qualitative research, a conceptual framework is similarly produced, and all that it is that if there are foundational theories you have, a conceptual framework is the combination of those foundational theories and any other participant views and other things that help you to make the original theoretical concepts that you have much more fruitful and more relevant to the specific phenomena that you're studying. And this new framework that emerges from these combinations of things is what we would class as a conceptual framework. Now, that description of conceptual framework is very, very clouded by the fact that it comes at the back end of another presentation. But tomorrow, when we look much more closely at the issue of theoretical frameworks and conceptual frameworks, you will see much, much more clearly what it is, how one differentiates these frameworks from each other. But what I would like you to do, and this is an exercise that's usually really good for individuals developing studies, is that you look at what it is that you are studying, and then you look at the opportunities for you to integrate theory into your work. And remember, I've identified that there are three places theory as a paradigm is an opportunity space. So that whole ontology, epistemology, methodology, and methods part, you are able to integrate theory there. But also, then the next opportunity is that you can integrate theory when it comes to its application or relevance as a lens. And then you can also integrate theory when it comes to its relevance as new knowledge. So those are the opportunities but you should look at those in relation to your particular study. And of course, the questions that you would ask in relation to this are essentially about whether or not you've identified these potential theoretical contribution opportunities in terms of the theoretical paradigm, or theory as a lens, or theory as knowledge type of exploration. Now, of course, research is about layering existing and pre-existing sources of knowledge, so you become more sophisticated in how you apply certain concepts. So this whole thing of the integration of knowledge, of theory, doesn't happen on its own. It happens all the way throughout the research process. And what I'm trying to show here is that as you plan your study and you search for data, there are opportunities for theory. When you do the actual research, there are opportunities for theory. When you collect data for that research. There's opportunities for theory application in terms of the methods and the methodologies you use. And then when you evaluate what is happening, there's also a potential for theory application. So, and I just wanted to show you that theory exists, or theory integration into your study exists at every level throughout every element of the research process. And similarly, I've taken the research process here and broken it up. This picture or this slide is one that I've shared with you in previous research process related presentations. You will see that all the steps, the decision about topics, the developing an overview of a topic, deciding what you require as information, the way you organize data, the way you synthesize things and bring up and come up with a new theoretical position. Every single step involves some type of theoretical integration. Theoretical integration is theory as a paradigm, or as theory as a lens, or theory as new knowledge. It all depends on the particular step that you're looking at. But the story, the absolute non-negotiable, is that theory integration is existent in every little thing that we do. So for the first set, I've identified that are useful for further reading, so you can kind of get a sense of the way in which the role of theory is expanded on or developed in relation to your work or doctoral level work. So I've also got another set of slides, and then of course, as always, it's good to have a self-development exercise where maybe you could just do one slide and then you must articulate 3 things in relation to that slide. What is your research question? What is the paradigm? And what is the data collection method that you're going to look at? And then you look at those 3 things and talk about how think about the opportunities for theory integration look like. This is quite similar to the earlier exercise, but it also kind of breaks things down in a way that I think might be helpful for some, more so than the first student exercise required people to be. Right, so the second part, and this is what we will cover tomorrow, or sorry, not tomorrow, at our next session, which is on the 8th, in a couple of days' time. We will now look specifically at types of theoretical contributions, and the 2 specific types that are spoken about are the theoretical framework and the conceptual frameworks, and we'll speak about those. But no matter what type or typology of theoretical, it doesn't matter what type of theoretical framework or conceptual framework that we are looking at. Essentially, all these things are expressions of the application of theory within your work. So we will expand on that in the second lecture, but for now, we can take a pause and I will entertain questions that have been put out, and I will respond to each methodically. I'm just putting this up. All right, I'm just putting these questions up and I will run through all of them. Firstly, Rolf asks if the development of concepts and theories can be part of a master's dissertation also. The answer is yes. There actually is no research work that you can do in which concept development and theories development are not relevant. They must be. All that differs is that at different levels, the examiners have different requirements of how explicit you make your theory integration become. So in a master's level, like a mini dissertation, the smaller masters, where if you're someone who's studying a program where you are only doing research maybe for one semester or for one of the 2 years, then you will be able to integrate theories, but they may allow you to get away with just integrating them into the different chapters without you specifically having a standalone chapter on theory. So in essence, what would happen is that in a master's level piece of work, if it's a mini dissertation, you would talk about theory as a paradigm, so that whole issue around ontological position of your work, epistemological position, the methodologies, all that will be theory informed. But the issue around, and then of course, in your literature review in that same level, you would integrate theories that you think were useful in informing your study. So those are your application of theory as a lens. Then at the very, very end, you may actually decide that, look, these discoveries that I made can be best explained using these other theories as guiding principles. And that is also an application of theory, but this time theory as new knowledge. So if you really think about it, it exists everywhere. At a doctoral level or in a full master's, not a mini dissertation, in a full master's, all those things that I spoke about exist, but there's an additional requirement for people to have a specific chapter on theoretical stroke conceptual frameworks. And that chapter generally happens as a chapter in a so people have chapter 1 as the introduction and the background, chapter 2 will be the literature review, and it will be the specific part where they talk more on the intent of theory as a lens. That whole thing of saying, look, in studying this phenomenon, and each of these theories explain my phenomena in this way, then I've 2 bits that I think are important and my key concepts, and they present my conceptual framework. That would be what a full master's or a doctoral level piece of work would look like when it comes to theory integration. So then they say, how do you know the theory you have chosen is relevant to your design? Well, in actual fact, the whole story around how you integrate theory is that once you make a decision at an ontological level or epistemology, if you decide that you are someone who believes that your topic should be understood from a subjectivism point of view, that it is the individual who shapes what it is that they see, then you are married now to qualitative research and to interpretative qualitative research. So therefore, the methodologies that you use must be things that align with that choice. So it is really a decision you make from the very beginning when you make a choice about how you're choosing to see your topic. Do you see your topic in terms of an objectivist thing? Do you see it in terms of it being subjectivist? Do you see it in terms of it being constructionist? Once you make those decisions, then the rest of the choices are made because you have subscribed to a set of philosophical positions. To what extent is one to make use of existing theories, and to what extent can one develop one's own? Look, the whole way that you develop theory is a mixture of you looking at relevant concepts. So if you are studying a topic and the topic involves many concepts, so if the topic of your study is you're studying human motivation and its relationship to success and its relationship to gender. Then you have three concepts there. So by definition, then each of these three concepts have theoretical contributions. But if you were to study that only had one concept in it, then you have fewer theoretical possibilities of what you integrate. So that is all of it is defined by the extent to which by the number of concepts that are embedded in your work and so forth. And then the decision about how much you integrate on your own is really to do with what gaps, theoretical gaps you find. So if you study a topic and you find that existing theories don't really do a good service to this, and you have now found data that gives more information to fill the 20 gaps that are there, then you will then develop much more of your own. But if your own findings only add two new things because previous existing research was done a good job already, then you will make a smaller contribution. Sir, are you saying a theory may be replaced by a paradigm even in PhD thesis instead of using both of them? This is a question by Moses. No, I'm categorically not saying that. In actual fact, a paradigm is a theory. So I think the point that you're missing is we're talking about the role of theory in its umbrella format, not the role of a theory. We're talking about the role of theory. So, but I think you're mistaking it for the role of a theory. The role of theory is everything that represents an abstract generalization. So paradigms are theory. Models are theory. Conceptual frameworks are theory. Everything really that is, as I defined theory at the beginning, is what I'm talking about. The language makes it difficult to grasp epistemology. Look, there is nothing about research that's meant to be easy. It's difficult. So when you meet a difficult concept, you must feel the difficulty level. And then all you do is you just keep reading up about it, finding different explanations. But epistemology is the way in which we define and accept the reality that surrounds us. So in epistemology, people will say, I accept that my reality is socially constructed. Some people believe that their reality is a bit of social construction, it's a bit of the interpretations they hold about the world and so forth. But really that language of epistemology is one that people need to learn, and you learn it through exposure, clarification, exposure, clarification. Look, there's a question that's asking, Cincy is asking a question about how many theories are enough in a master's dissertation. In theory, look, there's no one answer to this, but when you look at a topic at master's level, you're probably going to look at one or two concepts within your title. So you would be looking at one or two relationships. If you're in a master's, you're looking at maybe success, student success and motivation. But in a doctorate, you might look at student success, motivation, social economics, this. So, and the more concepts that are buried, the more theories one expects to see. So at a master's level, some people go with one or two theories that inform their understanding. Doctorate, people will go with 3 to 5. There's no given limit, but there's just, it all aligns to the concepts that are integral to what you are looking at. And those concepts will come at just you understanding what are the variables that I'm interested in, where do these variables, what informs the theory around these variables. And if those variables are informed by two theories each, then you'll have that many theories in your work. But it's not a, yeah. And then of course, the issue of building conceptual frameworks, and this we will deal with tomorrow in greater depth, but since he has asked it here, theoretical frameworks are theories that are pre-existing and they were written for a different reason from you. But conceptual frameworks is when you take all these theoretical frameworks that informed your initial understanding and you say, hey, this theoretical framework spoke about 30 things, but I'm only interested in two of these things. So your conceptual framework only extracts the two that are of interest. So it doesn't mean that your conceptual framework will take 20 theories, 20 concepts from theory A, 40 from this. It may just borrow 2 or 3. And the decision about what matters and not matters is entirely driven by you, the researcher. Look, the constructivism and constructionism really, there's a question that asks about difference, and this is to do with semantics, that when you get into the world of constructionism, people will talk about constructivism being an active process in which people construct, in which the reality that you're in is actively constructed by you. But whereas when people talk about constructionism, they're talking about it as an occurring phenomena that will occur without your active participation. So, but the difference is very slight, and it only really matters to people who are deeply ingrained in this. Very much like how people talk about empowerment versus empowerment. Both of them are to do with the movement of power to a less empowered space, but one will say power moved because you took it, and the other said power moved because you were given the power. So with constructivism and constructionism, constructivism talks about the construction of your reality being a product of you actively creating it. Then constructionism is the construction of your reality where it happens and you are quite passive in its happening. But really the difference is too minor to be something that you want to focus on, because unless you were doing a constructivist analysis as your primary subject topic. These key paradigm questions, must we use it somewhere in our work to shape its structure? The answer is yes. Of course, when you make a choice about whether you're going to go qualitative or quantitative, you've had to make a decision about which epistemology works for you. So you have to represent that. When you make a choice about whether you go quantitative or qualitative, you've made a decision about what methodology works. So you do apply these paradigm questions everywhere. Sorry, there's a question that asked me to explain concurrent and sequential qualitative. There actually isn't. Concurrent and sequential don't exist in qualitative research, but this question, the person who has asked me this question needs to refer back to my session on mixed methods research. So if you really need, it's not something I can explain, but concurrent research is when people do both qualitative and quantitative methodologies at the same time in a study, and sequential is when the quali or the quanti happens first, followed by the other. But really, this is a question for a different session. Yes. So yes. So this question about mixed method things, it needs to be presented in another session, but I think I've kind of answered it. So in a concurrent mixed method study, you might decide that you're going to do interviews and have a survey and you launch them both at the same time, but they all are for one study. Or in a sequential study, you might say, look, I will start with interviews and the answers I will get from that, I will use them to develop a quantitative survey. So that's, and then can a conceptual framework be further developed after data collection? That's a question for tomorrow, but the answer is yes. What is the criteria to use two theories for a single study? Can we use two theories if we are interested in? I think I've answered this already when I spoke about the fact that the number of theories is determined by the number of concepts that are embedded in what you're interested in. So if you are interested in motivation and cognitive strength, then of course you have more than one theory that you look at. How would you advise that I assign a theory to identify themes? I think this question is, I'm not sure I truly understand it, but I hope that my explanations up to this point have offered some insight. The way that you assign theories to things really depends on the different concepts that are integrated into your interest. If your interest is 5 theories, then that's what you do. There's one that asks me to talk about interpretivism as a paradigm. Look, there's a way, one of the paradigms or epistemological positions that are taken, constructs, that the reality that we face is a result of interpretation and nothing else. That literally, whether someone expresses something as being good, big, small, has to do with interpretation, and it's more of a cognitive process. So if you give something to a person with negative interpretations of life, everything they see will be painted negatively. Whereas if you give it to someone who's positive, they'll see everything positively. So ultimately, their sense of what is real or not real is driven by the nature of interpretations that they hold, rather than the objective assessment or a subjective viewpoint. Someone has asked something about law dissertations, I think, and being quite specialized, that they use qualitative methods. Remember, my position has always been that you can, or even though you are using one methodology, you cannot just know that methodology, because the context is, that argument would be the same as suggesting that if you like BMWs, you are someone, you never know what other cars are about, because for you to like a BMW over the other cars, you need to know what the other cars have on offer. So a lot of what I teach you here is not because I want you to apply it, but it is because you cannot do any research without knowing this. But there is no way that you can do any study without knowing how theory integrates. So even in law, the decision may be that you do qualitative work, but your identification of what theories inform your study, how you will develop a questionnaire, all of those things come from an understanding of theory. If one chooses to develop a model on a chosen phenomena, can this be done from theory as new knowledge? Yes, the answer is yes to that. What is the difference between a theoretical framework and a model? Please attend tomorrow's session for this. If we use two theories in our research, how will be the order of putting paradigm? Are we supposed to explain paradigm for both theories subsequently? Look, I think I'm not sure what this question is about, but you will choose the paradigm of your study once and for all. Once you've chosen it, everything else by definition falls in that paradigm. So you don't have to keep describing paradigm over and of what is the difference between theoretical frameworks and literature review. Theoretical frameworks are you specifically identifying specific theories that have been put together, models and stuff that relate to explaining your topic. A literature review is you reviewing all sorts of literature that relates to your topic, and that literature can even include theoretical frameworks. So a theoretical framework is a baby to a literature review. The last one is Mike saying, thanks, Prof, for the presentation. What then is the reality of someone who is doing research in ethics? Look, that reality changes. It depends. You might think that the ethics of life is an objective story, where someone will say, look, there's just right or wrong, there are no middle points. You might believe that no, ethics is to do with people's subjectivity. So depending on who you are and the moral value system, your subjectivism is what drives you. Or someone will say, no, ethics is an ever-changing space that is constructed by what we see and who we experience. So you would do it constructively, in a constructivist way. But all those choices are open to you. You just make a position about what fits the things that you can offer. Okay, yes, yeah. So folks, I think these are the questions that have been published for me to consider. And I cannot, it's 7:34. I think we have gone well beyond what I expected. I see if I use triangulation, what epistemological stance should be considered. Look, this is a slightly vague question. The type of triangulation can happen where you triangulate methodologies, you triangulate methods, you triangulate all sorts of things. But if assuming you're talking about triangulation of paradigms where you've triangulated qualitative and quantitative research, then you are of course saying that you believe that the world is a mixture of both, and the epistemology that is related to that is pragmatism, which I haven't spoken about here because it just didn't come up, but I've covered it elsewhere. Is it fine to use theories that seem to interrelate to each other? I think it's necessary, but it is fine to use them, but you often have to ask why do you need them both, or does one make a better representation of your topic than the other? Right, ladies and gents, we've had a wonderful evening. Many questions, 22 questions. So we've had quite a wide range of things that were posed. And what I want to encourage everybody is that please listen to the videos before this, because the less you are aware of what came before this, the more confused you will become when you consider some of the things that I assume you know. And of course, once you do that, then some of these questions posed here will explain themselves. And I will see you, tonight is the 6th. I will see you on the night of the 8th, when we have part 2 that looks specifically at theoretical frameworks and conceptual frameworks. I wish you all a good night. See you in a couple of days' time. Take care.